the Guinea Bissau International Ships Registry, in a blatantly political move, informed the Freedom Flotilla Coalition that it had withdrawn the Guinea Bissau flag from 2 of our ships. Without a flag, we cannot sail.
That was Huweda Aref, a spokesperson for the Freedom Flotilla, currently stuck in Turkey in its attempt to deliver 5,500 tons of humanitarian aid to the besieged people of Gaza. The organization learned on Friday that Guinea-Bissau decided to remove its flag from 2 of the vessels, including the main vessel carrying the cargo. They were due to sail from ports in Turkey on Friday. A surprise inspection and request by Guinea-Bissau authorities, which they described as unusual and political, was followed by a decision to withdraw Guinea-Bissau's flags. That government's officials have declined to speak to the media. On Friday, UN officials demanded the safe passage of the flotilla and called on Israel to adhere to international law and orders of the International Court of Justice to allow unimpeded access for humanitarian aid. Dan Kovalik is a human rights lawyer and a law professor at the University of Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He is a part of the Freedom Flotilla, and he was in Istanbul last week. He's in touch with people on the ground. Dan, could you give us an update?
Yeah, so Israel and the U.S. are trying very hard to prevent this flotilla from taking off towards Gaza. And the latest thing that has happened is apparently Israel has convinced Guinea Bissau to withdraw their flag, I guess, from one of the main ships. And what that means is the ship is stateless, which means you have rights, but you don't have the backing of a state behind you. If Israel, and they probably will do this, intercepts the ship and boards it, you don't have the protection of that state in that case.
You have even difficulty proving standing.
Yes, and well, it's also going to mean, and the Turkish government is also trying to prevent this from happening again because of pressure from the U.S. and Israel, and they're going to be less likely to let it go if they don't have a state sponsor. So, the organizers of the flotilla are trying to find another state sponsor, but it's been hard. Turkey was a state sponsor. They were going to fly under a Turkish flag, which would have been great, and Turkey withdrew the flag. So. Countries are getting scared off because what happens if Israel intercepts a ship under, say, a Guinea-Bissau flag, it gets Guinea-Bissau involved. And if Israel attacks people, attacks the ship, it's really like attacking Guinea-Bissau. And now you have possibly an act of war against that country, and then they may feel they want to respond. And most countries don't want to be put in that position. So it's not easy to find a country to sponsor.
So, okay, first there's that hurdle. And we know that there's a variety of behaviors from Israel that can be expected based on past experience, which even included executing, and ended up being 10 people because one died later, in cold blood in international waters over trying to bring supplies like they're doing now. And at that was nothing on the scale of what they're attempting to bring in now because there's such a huge need now.
Yeah, no, it's correct. Literally, these folks who are planning to do this voyage, they are risking their lives. Knowingly, they are risking their lives. Certainly risking their freedom because they will certainly be arrested by Israel. Like that's the best case scenario. And when they're under Israeli custody, they will most likely be tortured. Again, they know all this. And again, they could be killed. So these are very brave people. They deserve a lot of respect and support. And of course, now they've been stuck in Turkey for now an indefinite amount of time. And that's costly. It costs money to be away from home. And, most of these are Europeans and some Americans as well. It takes a lot of commitment to do something like this. So that needs to be applauded.
Is there some mechanism by which this can be brought either or both to the floor of the General Assembly at the United Nations and to the Security Council?
Yes, there is. I mean, and actually I know I'm part of this lawyers group that was in Istanbul to talk about support for Gaza, including support for the flotilla, legal support. And there are lawyers amongst us that are lobbying for this to be taken up with either the General Assembly or the Security Council, as you note. And we talked about last time that the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, which is a very, prestigious office of the United Nations, they put out a statement saying that the flotilla should be allowed to sail and be given safe passage to Gaza. And so they're trying to ask the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights to be the one to try to take this up with the United Nations. That could happen.
There's also U.S. law around questions, for example, of war crimes. Originally, the 18 U.S.C. 2441 war crimes has from Title 18 Crimes and Criminal Procedure. You have under the definitions that this expanded basically on the previous one, including anyone who commits a violation of the Geneva Conventions, which Israel clearly did with the attack on Iran, on the embassy in Syria, and also that this catastrophe in the face of instruction, in essence, from the ICJ, from the International Court of Justice, to enable aid. I don't see how that you could reconcile blowing this flotilla out of the water on the one hand, after the defunding of the aid groups and the killing of some of them, with that order. Is there some way that you can't go into the United States courts to shut this down? Not you, but someone.
Well, I think that theoretically there are ways to do that. Yes, because as you say, this is codified in U.S. law. Even if it weren't, the U.S. is a party to the Genocide Convention, which if you're a party to an international convention, under U.S. law, it becomes, or under the Constitution, it becomes U.S. law, right? So theoretically, you could go into the court to try to enforce those things against the U.S. government. However, attempts like that have been made. The Center for Constitutional Rights brought a case on behalf of some Palestinians against Joe Biden last year for aiding and abetting the genocide. And they brought it in a very progressive court in the Northern District of California, federal court in the Northern District of California. And that court did something that most courts are going to do. And it dismissed the case under the political question doctrine. And what does that mean? Essentially, it said, look, there's a plausible case that Biden is aiding and abetting genocide. However, foreign policy is firmly committed to the executive branch of the government, meaning the president, under the U.S. Constitution. Therefore, under the political question doctrine, I, the court, am going to punt this issue. I'm not going to deal with it because I'm not going to trample on the foreign policy prerogatives of the White House.
So what they're saying, in essence, let me interrupt you here because it's just so people understand. What they're saying basically, this is a political question, and in the context of our government under the Constitution, means this is something that the president has decided, and if you don't like that, the people will decide it at the next election, right? That's the essence of this doctrine.
That's essentially, yes. And
so the court is basically saying that, look, it's up to the next election for the people to decide if we want war crimes to be a part of our foreign policy.
Yes, and possibly it's up to Congress to act as well. Congress could act, but the court is saying they shouldn't act, that it's not in the realm of the judiciary to get into the weeds on that. I disagree with that, by the way. I think, they get involved in everything. As you know, the Supreme Court has become a very activist court and has been for a long time. And they get involved in all sorts of constitutional issues. This shouldn't be different than anything else, but, it takes some courage to do that. And even if a district court judge would take it up, I would expect the Court of Appeals to reverse very quickly. And if not the Court of Appeals, certainly the Supreme Court would. So, yes, there's a theoretical way to challenge this in the courts, but sadly, it's only theoretical at this point. I don't think they're going to touch it.
interesting reality for the country that proclaims the rule of law. Dan, thank
Indeed.
you much. Appreciate your time, and we'll be asking you for follow-ups on this as it goes on.
Thank you, Don.
For KPFK, I'm Don DeBar.